Good afternoon. For this program, we will be thinking about and listening to Mozart, who is a composer both very easy to talk about in superlatives and in generalities, and harder in specifics. Many books about Mozart succeed mainly in enthusing about him as a kind of incredibly talented young son who simply goes beyond all expectations and is just beyond words. To some extent, that's true. But I'd like to think about Mozart a bit today in terms of a musician who began in a situation of extraordinary privilege for someone who was going to become a composer. He shares with Mendelssohn the advantage of extraordinary early education, in this case at the hands of his father, tremendous cultural milieu, a circle of acquaintances and opportunities which put him forward in an extremely supportive way, as in the case of Mendelssohn, and an amazing ability of his own to essentially push himself, because there was really hardly any music to push him. He recognized as he went along through his career that the music of Haydn was very rich for him, and particularly at a certain period. He really imbibed not only the spirit, but the substance and the formal energy of Haydn. And when he actually heard Bach live, it reinforced an impression he'd had from playing over his storehouse of manuscripts of Bach, that Bach had, as he said, finally somebody who could teach him something. And coming from Mozart, that was an amazing admission, because he was probably the healthiest ego among composers, at least the healthiest recorded ego. His sense of his own value was, we would have to say, very accurate, which is in a way quite frightening. He understood that he had some kind of power, and it is the power of a sort of magician, a kind of conjurer, based, of course, on the most solid musical principles and practices. There is, in listening to Mozart, a strange sensation from time to time of doors suddenly opening, or sometimes trapdoors or false doors. Windows are suddenly cast open. Wind comes through that's of a kind of suddenness and bringing kinds of aromas and changes that we are not expecting. And we can't always pinpoint what is happening to our emotions at that point. There can be threatening tempests, there can be moments of consolation, but the surface doesn't seem to change very much. They are somehow below the obvious surface, and yet we as listeners are struck and actually sometimes confused and speechless and almost mindless trying to receive it. There's a German word, unheimlich, for which there's not really a perfect musical English equivalent. It has to do with beyond, unexplainably magical. And it's a word more appropriate to moments in Mozart than probably any other composer. Today we'll hear three pieces of Mozart in which all these kinds of things happen. The winds will blow, the doors will open, and the unheimlich will certainly occur, most specifically perhaps in the midpoint of the string trio in D major. The B-flat trio, 502, is from a genre where it's possible to think that Mozart had somewhat less interest than in certain other kinds of music, notably the piano concerto or the string quintet, where he was clearly deeply engaged by the combination itself. However, I have discovered, certainly in thinking about these concerts, that the trios are waiting for us, those of us who have not paid a lot of attention, with a very a remarkable kind of Mozart, a Mozart that can sound sometimes a bit official and efficient, but eventually gets to certain very, very specific points where Mozart can alone go. This piece is nicely built so that each movement moves somewhat purposefully, I think, away from more conventional statement until it arrives in the last movement with a real kind of exhilaration and freshness. It is one of his most satisfactory chamber music finales. It's played today. I wish to state I haven't mentioned performers too often because you can find them on your wonderfully prepared screens. But playing this piece on this concert was a group from our very, very first founding group. All of us who sort of came to Creek and decided to do this. And the three players here are Georgia Flizanis, Andrei Emelianov, and Robert Helps, who along with Michael Steinberg and Carlo Rodriguez really helped us to dream up and set in motion this festival. I remember right away games of anagrams, musical quiz fests among ourselves, a sense that this was a nourishing way to make music with one's friends. And we're delighted they're represented on this very early performance from our festival. Next, you will hear a really remarkable later string quintet by Mozart. As I said, it's a genre where he seems to feel that he is a master and belongs. Perhaps he's thinking about his own self as a chamber musician, playing string quartets in an informal quartet in which he was always the violist, often with his friend Haydn as the violinist. And having two violas, I think, speaks to Mozart in a certain sonority way, and also in terms of the kind of function of the viola in the string quartet, of a kind of subtlety of harmony, of having the most unusual note in the chord, of having a voice that we want particularly to be both hidden and highly significant. In any case, this is a remarkable, as all the quintets are, remarkable, different world from string quartet, more leisurely, more thoughtful, more sonically varied, and it contains a moment of the pure unheimlich in the middle of the slow movement. The players in this performance are playing very new instruments by our friend, the physicist W.A. Jack Fry. And in the course of the festival, we had a number of features about the science and art of violin making, which he led and which were fascinating to both lay listeners, scientific listeners, and musicians. And on the occasion of this quintet, we decided on the experiment of all playing on Fry instruments, except for the cello, in which our cellist is playing his own instrument. All of us were virtually handed the instruments on day of or day before, so it was a double adventure and exciting for us. And so we were thinking both about the remarkable beauties of this trio and also relishing the ways in which in our hands that the art of violin making is still crucial and important, fascinating, as difficult, in fact, to describe and to penetrate as the music of Mozart. Finally, a piano concerto in A major, which has the greatest of Mozart qualities, the ability to seem to circulate calmly, press no points very hard, and still deliver a unique fascination. It's a piece which from the outside you could say stays calm. And yet every event belongs seemingly to this piece only. Every event seems to be perfectly gauged for the mood, the subtlety, the inwardness, and the thoughtfulness of this very piece. And it's become a beloved piece to pianists and string players. It's one of the ones that Mozart designated as performable as here with just the accompaniment of individual string parts. It really brings the players and the soloist into a world where our own agency is less important than letting the composer speak. And he speaks in tones which, if they were conversational, would never be really forte and never really pianissimo, but are all specific and all belong only in their moment in this piece. So a beautiful example of the qualities in Mozart that I was mentioning before, which we can't really describe, but which work their will, which conjure, which perform their own magic. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back with you yet one more time in our series.